Today we're going to talk about catching and storing useful flows. And during this springtime, we always have a lot of water that is flowing, and it'll flow for up to 8 weeks, maybe a little longer. And actually this flow right here will continue for longer than that, but we have other places where we'll have some water flow for maybe 4 to 8 weeks. And we'll talk about that in this video as far as useful flows, catching and storing useful flows. And the two best examples I can think of are 1, water, and 2, sunlight. Springtime is one of my favorite times of year because of the flowing water that's coming down, the snow melt, the rains that are coming. And what we try and do, one of the things we try and do is follow the principle of catching and storing useful flows. And water is absolutely one of those. So I'm going to show you how we do that, how we slow spread and soak water on our property. Because the dry times are coming, and we normally will have relatively dry to very dry summers. That's characteristic of North Idaho. And so while we have these useful flows, we want to capture and store it, catch and store it, and capture as well. So let me show you some of that. So this shows you one area where we have just this small little check dam. Basically, it's just a slow down the water and back it up here. And so every time we do that, we're gaining a little bit of benefit by doing that. And so we have these little pocket ponds, whatever you want to call them, that slow the water for us in these runs. And now let me show you a little bit bigger ponds. And by the way, none of this was here. So we put in a bunch of little check dams, just again, not to make these extensive ponds with dam walls and keyways and all this other stuff, and just more pocket ponds here and there to slow down the water. So we have this flow that comes down off the mountain from all the melt and all the seasonal springs, and then it dries up in maybe June, early June. But what we've done is we've set a few ponds up in here, dug them out to this seasonal flow area. And that's one way that we're capturing and storing all of that flow. And that we end up having water in our ponds year round. Well, only in the big one down there. This one actually dries out all the way. They're not 100% sealed. And that's okay by us. I mean, it's they're basically seasonal ponds. We have our basically our soil up here is a bit gravelly down, so it would be difficult to seal without putting large amounts of bentonite or whatever to do that. So we're not really concerned about that. So what we do though is put in those check dams that we talked about all the way through here, and then we've ponded actually three to four. One's a little duck pond that's inside of that. And that's one way that we capture these useful flows. And then the other way we capture water, in this case, talking about the flow of water, is in the spring we get quite a bit of rain. And so we use our rainwater catchment systems. There's one here, there's one over there. We do plan on increasing the capacity of these as well. And then over by the barn right there, you see another tank down there. Although I'm probably going to move that tank up here and connect it with this one because that's where it's most useful, because I've got this piece of gravity here, this small bit here that it provides 100% water for that hoop house down there. And we're going to put a few raised beds next to it this year. In between these tanks up here, that will provide all the water we need right down there. And that's probably about a 7-foot drop overall. It's enough. It's not a lot of pressure or anything like that, a couple PSI, but it's enough to hand water. And so those are a great example of using water as useful flows. And then the last thing I want to talk about as far as a useful flow is sunlight. You think of sunlight and the stored energy from sunlight. It's kind of, I know that sounds simplistic, but it's a great way to frame it. So when we capture sunlight in plants, and then in plants plants to animals, and then we preserve those things, whether we're processing animals or getting eggs or processing herbs and drying them, making tinctures, whatever. That is a way of taking all that energy from sunlight and preserving it. Okay, so we're following that principle of catching and storing useful flows. So I hope that was helpful to you. There's many more examples, but water and sunlight are the two greatest examples that I can think of. If you can think of more, let me know. I'd love to hear some other ideas on ways to think like that. Okay, and we can say the same thing about taking waste materials, turning waste into and making them resources. And I'm going to do a video on that because that's very fundamental, and a lot of people miss a lot of opportunities in that realm. So like this video, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think. What did you take away from it? What do you have to add to it?